It's Piers Thompson.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming tonight. After the fire, in some ways, there was a moment of adrenaline charge. You know, we saw this terrible thing, and I know my personal response to it was to get out, to talk, to fight, to support. But we're now 6 months later. I mean, many of you will have been on the silent march this evening. And you know what? We are traumatized here. I hardly accept it myself. But in my own household, my daughter has PTSD. She's 14. She saw 71 of our neighbors and friends burning to death. And she can't deal with it. I can't deal with it. My wife can't deal with it. In many ways, we'd like to go back to how we were on the 13th of June. You know, I was a bohemian dilettante. We were a family with all our normal problems. But that night, the whole world changed. And it's given us an awesome responsibility. You know, what we saw that night cannot be unseen. It's changed us all, and we can't go back to not caring, which many of us were doing before the fire. We have to plough on. You know, I almost miss the days when I'd sit around with Edward Daffard, you know, talking about Silchester and how to save it. And we'd shout into the abyss, and no one would listen. Then we had the fire, and the day after, literally everyone in the world was sticking a microphone in your face. So we have to fight on. And, you know, a lot of you, well, I believe, you know, in the fairness of the world, but it's really not going the right way at the moment. We in Silchester, I come from Silchester, it's the sister estate to Lancaster West, with the other side of the railway. We were fighting regeneration. Our friends and neighbours helped us. They supported us shoulder to shoulder. We share a pub. We share a convenience store. That night, we lost them, and we cannot allow their deaths to be in vain. We applied at Silchester RA, Residents Association, we applied to be a core participant, a CP, on the Grenfell inquiry. We thought, well, you know, we'd seen them clad the tower, we'd experienced the contempt and disregard that the rotten borough has for ordinary working people. We knew, we had valuable insight. We have been refused core participant status on this inquiry. They're not interested in what 500 households who lived next door saw over 5 years. The next thing that's happened is we've seen that many of our friends and neighbours right now are being smeared. There's a campaign that started in the Times with a man called Dominic Kennedy, who I got in touch with him because I heard he was trying to smear Eddie Daffon. And I think I managed to stop him doing that. But they're smearing our friends, our supporters, the people, ordinary people, who have just tried to fight for the rights of people not to have their homes demolished. And this isn't, you know, random. This is a deliberate, targeted campaign. There's one person who the Daily Mail picked out, Kirdi Gallardo. She's a lady in a wheelchair. I mean, I radicalised her. I remember giving her the first leaflet explaining that the borough wanted to, in cahoots with developers, knock down all our houses, scatter our community, enclose our green spaces. And on Monday night, I saw her, a picture of her in a wheelchair, accusing her of being some kind of far-left activist, hijacking Grenfell for her own purposes. I mean, I don't know, some of you may know about Haringey and the HTV situation there, where £2 billion worth of assets were about, or are about, to be handed over to Lendlease, a developer that also has some weird financial instrument. Now, ordinary people like you guys in the Labour Party have deselected 17 of the candidates who wanted to hand over public assets. Yet, that is some kind of far left insurgency. So, the one thing I have learned in my time, first fighting to save our homes, and then in the effort we're all making here to make sure that Grenfell will not be forgotten, swept under the carpet, is we have to be united. We have to be united, and they are setting out to divide us now. Whether it's the smear campaigns, you know, whether it's misquoting Ishmael or Sid, they're setting out to divide us. And we have to stay together, we have to support each other, because we need justice for Grenfell, we need justice for other people in social housing in RBKC, and we need justice for people throughout London and the rest of the country. Remember, your home is at risk.
I think, to me, it's, well, I found as a journalist that the events at Grenfell I've been haunted by them by far more than anything I've ever had to report in the last 40 years of my reporting career. Iraq, Afghanistan, the rest of it. This was in our time, in our town, to our people. And it was man-made, and it was made by us for tolerating a situation in which such a thing can happen. And it can still happen. I remember arriving at the tower at sort of around 6:30 in the morning, on the morning of the night, and seeing what was going on, and feeling that I had no way into the community that surrounded the tower. I looked for local journalists. There are very few local journalists now because Facebook has taken all the advertising from the local papers, and they can afford no journalists, so they're either closed or they don't exist. And I thought then, as I looked around at my colleagues who were also looking for ways into what had happened, ways of communicating with people, the brutal reality was that journalists are part of the elite, and they're not part of the community to whom they broadcast, for whom they write for, or anything else. And we had a huge learning curve to surmount. But I found the community was extraordinarily warm, very receptive to being asked questions and to helping to assist us in understanding what had actually happened. I also thought I had no connection, but I did of course have a connection, as some people here will already know, because 50 days before the fire, I was with the Microsoft billionaire Bill Gates at an event called DebateMate, in which schools were competing with each other in debating competition. And I was there to judge the best floor speech for 12 to 15-year-olds. And the outstanding person was Ferdowz Hashim, age 12. She gave the most beautiful, amazingly constructed speech with passion, with articulate, marvelous usage of language. And I thought, my God, that girl's going to go a long way. And I had no doubt whatever in nominating her, and Bill Gates gave her the prize for the best floor speech. And then on my second day at Grenfell Tower, as I looked along the wall of missing, I saw her on the wall. I could not believe that she could have perished. And for a moment, there was a chance she hadn't. But in fact, within about 24 hours, it became clear that she and her entire family died on the 23rd floor. And there, cut down, was this brilliant child and her lovely family. And so that has spurred me, and I know lots of other people, into trying to do whatever can be done to learn lessons from what has happened, and to comfort and to assist and to support those people who survived, and who in the wider community also affected so deeply by what happened. But I think the thing which also I feel very strongly about is that the national lessons of Grenfell have to be learned. When it first happened, the government was full of promises about dealing with the other 600 towers, about allowing local authorities to claim money for sprinklers. Actually, in our own survey of local authorities who have applied for sprinklers in similar towers, they've all been turned down. And the fact is, if we don't learn from Grenfell, there are Grenfells waiting to happen all over the country. And they also expose the reality that we simply have not prioritised social housing, anything like that. And from this,
voices, it's listening to our voices.
Listening to your voices, listening to the community, it's what the speaker earlier said. You know, politicians have to learn to listen, and learn to listen to the community they serve. The problem with Parliament is that it's a very inward-looking box, and it's a funny old box, and it's a rotting box in the sense that it's all falling down. Yes. And in some ways it kind of reflects what's going on inside. And we have to break out of that and go back to the community. We are the most centralized society in Europe. Everything is from the center. Not nearly enough is from the community. And the community has to be empowered, and empowered to change the world locally that we live in. Because the local has suffered from the centralization of power. Local authorities have dwindled in their power. Whatever you think of Kensington local authority, it is an extreme one in the sense that it's so rich and has done so little in the past for social housing and for the communities like Grenfell. The fact is, local authorities need to be re-empowered so that local people can speak to local politicians about local issues and get local action. It's no good saying, oh, well, we'll ask the government. It has to work the other way. The government has to talk to and listen to local authorities. Anyway, so I feel there is a national message here that we mustn't lose sight of, because if we do lose sight of it, there will be another disaster. And there will be a continuing disaster, which is the fracture of Britain between the rich and the poor. Not the poor in terms of literally out on the street, but people who don't earn as much as the rich. And that split between those who have and those who have less is not healthy and cannot be allowed to continue in the long run. You know, Scotland today has interestingly increased by very little income tax on the richer segment, third of society. And that really needs to happen across the country in order to enable a real renewal of social housing and a vast expansion of the building of public housing. Every other system has failed. Housing associations, wonderful though they were, are no longer able to fill the void. Affordable housing is a misnomer. They're unaffordable houses. Unaffordable houses. There's no point building affordable housing. People actually simply want to live in a house. Whether they own it or rent it, as long as they have security of tenure, that is really the secret. And in fact, there were people in Grenfell for very long periods of time with real security, and they lost it. They lost everything, and many of them lost their lives. So I just hope that we can learn a national lesson from this terrible, terrible and intimate local disaster. So thank you very much. There's not much we can do except to try to report what you feel and what you think and what you want done. Thank you very much.
The stockbroker.
I'm so moved and honoured to be here tonight. I'm from the Sussex coast. I have links to West London. My dad was a QPR fan, and in the 80s, in the late 70s, early 80s, we did lots of stuff around here. I remember the Ladbroke Grove Skins. I remember the Battle of Acklam Hall, anti-fascist stuff, Rock Against Racism. Anyway, a few days after the fire, when I just basically listened. Obviously, I was as horrified as everybody from looking from where I was in West Sussex, and I just listened to what was going on, and I listened to what was being said, and a few days later I wrote this. It's called Keeping Up Appearances. The clue's in the name. Royal Borough. We serve Knightsbridge, not Latimer Road. We're here for our quality voters with a moneyed and tasteful postcode. We tolerate you since we have to, and we hope that you'll soon move elsewhere. Until then, we'll do our legal duty. If you cause any problems, beware. Your flats are all crumbling eyesores. Your neighbours are your social betters. They paid millions to live in this area. Some are next door to scroungers and debtors. So it's time to refurbish your building. Not with fire doors, sprinklers and care, but with cladding to make it look nicer so the rich can pretend you're not there. It's unsafe, you complain. That's just rubbish. We've been running it that way for years. Just be grateful you're housed in this borough and make sure that you're not in arrears. You've new skins on your homes, they look lovely. Regulations and standards are met, all done legally and within budget. So get on with your lives and don't fret. Those new skins caused a ghastly inferno. But that council is still in control. That some should be charged with manslaughter and the rest all relieved of their role. Now the people cry justice for Grenfell in the name of those folk left alone in a world where appearances mattered more than flesh, skin, hair, muscle and bone. Thank you. And I want to do one more because it didn't half remind me of something else. A memory seared into my brain since I was 9 years old. Now this starts off as just a nice poem about being a 9-year-old on the Sussex coast and then turns into something else. And it's called My 9th Birthday. Some of you old enough will remember this. I'm sure it won't surprise you to learn I was a proper little show-off. Too clever by half, said my Victorian grandmother who lived in the flat downstairs. You spoil him, Muriel. Children should be seen and not heard. Be quiet, John. When you begin to pay a little, then you can begin to say a little. There were plenty more such epithets. If I asked what was for tea on the day she was in charge of me, she'd always say, air pie and a walk round, or bread and pullet. And when she read about the latest exploits of the royal family or anyone else remotely wealthy or privileged in the pages of her beloved Daily Express, she'd often exclaim with heartfelt approval, it's not for the likes of us. When, years later, I read The Ragged Trouser Philanthropist by Robert Tressel and heard that particular servile catchphrase again, I felt retrospectively vindicated in my instinctive determination back then to do the exact opposite of nearly everything she told me. Despite my grandmother's best efforts, I was seen, heard and then some, in school and out. Self-assured and confident, playing the violin and recorder, writing little poems and songs and about to begin a massive project about the American Civil War based on the battle stories printed on the back of the unbelievably gory bubblegum picture cards we boys bought on our way to school. Cards with titles like Crushed by the Wheels, Wall of Corpses and Messenger of Death. If you're male and over 50, you may well remember. My form teacher liked me and let me help other kids in class. I had lots of friends, and if wannabe bullies hit me, I hit them back. Like I say, a proper little show-off. It was my 9th birthday. A Manor Hall Junior School in Southwick, West Sussex. When it was your birthday, you couldn't wait till lunchtime, but you had to. Then you stood in front of everyone else in the canteen. A big, colourful plastic cake was brought out with proper candles on it. You blew out the candles. Everyone sang happy birthday, even the kids who thought you were a show-off wanker. The teachers made sure of that. And you got the chance to grab a handful of sweets from a big jar. As far as I can remember, I was the only one with a birthday that day, so I had everyone's undivided attention. But I never got to show off. And I didn't want to show off. My 9th birthday was different. It was October the 21st, 1966. Before we went to the canteen for lunch and my little birthday cameo, we were told there was going to be a special assembly in the school hall. Everyone wondered what had happened. Even I realised they wouldn't have one just because it was my birthday. The headmaster, Mr. Young, came looking very sad and told us that earlier that day, a huge mountain of coal waste had engulfed a junior school like ours in a Welsh mining village called Aberfan, and many children the same age as us had lost their lives. He asked us to pray for them. We all did. Some of us cried. They still sang happy birthday in the canteen a few minutes later, but it wasn't a happy birthday at all. I kept thinking about those children. After I got home and talked to my parents and had my birthday tea with my friends, I tried to write a poem for Aberfan, but I couldn't. The poem I wanted to write was far too big for a 9-year-old. We did a collection at school. The money was sent to the disaster fund, and then, as happens when you're a child with supportive parents at a supportive school, other things quickly came along to take the sadness away. But on my birthday for the next few years, I always thought about the children of Aberfan. Years later, I learned about the underground springs below Colliery Waste at number 7 on the hill above the village, which caused the coal waste to turn to slurry and crash down on the school. Springs easily spotted on maps which were never even consulted. I learned about the negligence of the authorities and the insensitivity of the press. Some things never change. I learned about the father who, as the inquest into his child's death declared the cause to be asphyxia and multiple injuries, shouted out, "No, sir, buried alive by the National Coal Board." I learned how a ruling was made that parents had somehow to prove their children's deaths had caused them anguish before they could benefit from the disaster fund, and that some of the money from that fund was used to clear the other waste tips above Aberfan because the Coal Board refused to pay for it to be done. I learned about the long-term psychological effects of the disaster on the whole village. In short, I learned how the lives of working class people, of working class children, were held cheap. So cheap. But that was much later. Back then, I was a child. A proper little show-off who didn't want to show off his 9th birthday, trying to write a poem for children like him, for the children of Aberfan. Thanks. 50 years later, nothing learned. Now I'm going to do one more for you. It is an honour to be here, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It's funny, it's silly, it's a wind-up, it's satirical, it's about the future. Obviously, the disgusting attitudes of the press are all around us. We can combat so much of it with social media, taking the piss out of them and the gullible people that believe them is an essential part of that. So this is one's for all of you, because this is about the way we change this shit. Because we are protesting everything, but we have to get rid of the scum that are doing this. We have to get rid of the scum at the council. We have to get rid of the scum who are running the country. And we all know that. Just look at us with the Scourge of the Land, with Jeremy Corbyn's favourite band. We all eat babies and we're commies too. We've all got AIDS and we'll give it to you. With scaly tails and horns and hooves. We undermine everything that moves. You can read about us in the right-wing press, the Sun, the Mail and the Express. But don't mess with us, because we're lefties and we smell. We're the Corbyn supporters from hell. If your telly goes wrong or your car won't start, you can bet your life we played our part. If your team doesn't win or you miss the bus, 10 to 1, it's all down to us. If a dog runs off with your copy of The Sun and brings it back with a crossword done. If your pet hamster wakes up dead or you find a squatter in your bed, we did it! And everything else as well, because we're Corbyn supporters from hell. We made your pub serve proper beer. We banned those broadcasts of Top Gear. We're all pacifists, Muslims, gay, and members of the IRA. We bring in asylum seekers and make you pay for their new sneakers. We won't sing songs for the Queen. We think X Factor is obscene, but don't mess with us, because we're lefties and we smell. We're the Corbyn supporters from hell. Thanks, everybody. Justice for Grenfell.